unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Canelo Alvarez says that Demetrius Andrade, he already has plans and he's not interested in a fight with fellow person on DAZN, fellow fighter, undefeated fighter, Demetrius Andrade, because he has those other plans and Andrade, quote, hasn't fought anyone. We're going to talk about all that and more in this here video. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to my channel for the latest and greatest. Before I get started, make sure you click the link in the description to get TUBEBUDDY. TUBEBUDDY is a browser extension to help you optimize your YouTube videos when you upload them. I've been using TUBEBUDDY personally for years, and it's been great. It's been a great service. Make sure you guys click the link in the description, read up on it, and I think you guys will like it. Now, before I get into my talk for today, and I want to compare and contrast, make sure you guys smash the like button. I'm going to play the clip. This is from Canelo Alvarez's exclusive interview with Brian Custer on his podcast show, The Last Stand. This is what Canelo Alvarez had to say, and then I'll be back with more of my thoughts. Please smash the like button and hit the subscribe button.
Guy who's fighting on DAZN, and we had him on, and he said he's been wanting you for a while, Demetrius Andrade. He says you've been avoiding him. Demetrius Andrade, is that a fight you want?
Oh my goodness. I say this a lot of times, but he fight nobody yet. No, you just see the record. He's fighting with nobody. So, and he's I have other plans.
Okay.
All right, so you guys just heard it yourself. Canelo Alvarez, he said that he doesn't want to fight Demetrius Andrade because, quote, he has other plans and he's really not interested in it. Now, the funny thing I noticed with this was when Brian Custer, who's, you know, a consummate professional, when he was asking, he's going through the motions, asking his prepared questions or whatnot, and he says to Canelo, he says, I had Demetrius Andrade on the show. And you could see Canelo's face. Just watch the clip because it's on Brian Custer's YouTube channel. You can see Canelo's face kind of like, you know, they're preparing for the question and he's almost has a scowl on his face. And then as soon as he hears the name Demetrius Andrade, I have a exact screenshot of that so you can see the exact face in real time that Canelo made. And from my opinion, like looking at the thing, as soon as he heard the name Demetrius Andrade, he was already like in defense mode, like, oh, here we go. And it looked like he had a problem with Demetrius Andrade name even being mentioned. And Canelo has constantly been, you know, criticized and called a diva. And that was almost like a diva type moment. Like, why are you wasting my time mentioning Demetrius Andrade when I'm giving you an interview? That's how I took it. So as soon as the question was finished, the first phrase, not like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. The first thing out of Canelo's mouth, and he conducted, I guess, this interview in English, the first words and the first phrase out of his mouth was, oh my goodness. Like, why did you even ask me? Why? I'm Canelo. Like, he was almost offended that he was asked about fighting an undefeated fighter. And he goes on to say that Demetrius Andrade, he doesn't deserve it because he hasn't fought nobody. And it's, man, listen, new media, it's getting crazy in the boxing game with these old media type of talking points where that's suitable. Like, Canelo's a great fighter. He only has one loss to Floyd Mayweather. I think he should have more. You know, I think the Golovkin first fight, Edeslandi Lara fight, those are the two fights that come to mind or whatever. And Canelo seemed like he felt it was a waste of time to, this is my perception of it, like you were wasting his time, his precious time. Oh my goodness. Like, why could you possibly be bringing up this name? You know, like, why did I do this interview? That's kind of how he was acting. And I thought that was a strange response, being that you're a fighter. Like, you're a fighter. There's people in or around your weight, or people you could have fought for years at 154, 155, 160, and possibly 168, right? You know, people have these questions. But Canelo, he seemed almost like it was almost like a diva moment. Like, oh my goodness, like, do I have to? Like almost like Demetrius Andrade was so beneath him. But again, you listen to what Canelo said. He said he hasn't fought anybody. Now, the reason with old media talking points that they usually don't hold water, and here's why. Because when you have an old media talking point, like for me, I'm a person who listens to what people say. I listen to the vernacular. I see and study body language if it's like a physical interview, or if I'm there in the person, and I kind of see what I gather from that. So when in the case of Demetrius Andrade, he's telling the world, I have other plans. So he's like, I'm not even interested. Like, basically, oh my goodness, you're wasting my time. And the reason he cites is because Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought anybody. But this is an age-old classical tale of kind of like the Black Murderers Row, where they tell you, people like in the comment section, right? They'll tell you, oh, this guy hasn't earned a fight with this guy, or this guy's not worthy to fight Canelo. You ask why, I say he hasn't fought no one. But at some point, wouldn't you have to start somewhere, right? So when did that become the boxing culture, where you have two guys, one loss between the two of them? They were in the same division at 154, and Canelo was kind of at the catch weight of 155 Canelo weight. They were at the same division at 160. Canelo himself said he wanted to unify that division, 160, and for some reason, he didn't complete that mission. Now he's at a whole nother weight class because he moved up to 175 to fight Kovalev, a fight nobody was even checking for, you know, and I don't think it did any crazy numbers because I didn't hear any announced numbers or whatever. And the fight, Canelo didn't look like his normal self, and neither did Kovalev, right? And you were at 160 and you said you wanted to unify and become undisputed there, but you didn't go past the two black fighters that remained in order to make that a reality. For some reason, you flew up in weight to fight Sergey Kovalev. You didn't go through Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, and you didn't go through Jamal Charlo, who was the #1 mandatory. Instead, the WBC franchised this man out and created this new position, the witness protection belt, and the designation to clean the plate. It's like a buffet. You ever go to Golden Corral or Hometown Buffet or any buffet, and no matter how much food you put on your plate, it's a buffet. So you could eat the food and say you didn't like the green beans, you got too much mac and cheese, so you didn't really eat it. And then the waitress comes by and the waitress says, "Are you done?" And even if there's food on your plate, the waitress will take the old plate with the remnants of food and give you a fresh, clean plate. Or you can go up to the buffet, you know, where they have the hot food coming out, and you can get a fresh plate and start over. In my household, we couldn't do that. Like, my parents would make us finish the plate before we go up for seconds. You can't just eat what you want. You have to eat vegetables, blah, blah, blah. So the reason I say that is when we're talking about Canelo Alvarez, the franchise champion allowed him to just not eat his veggies by fighting Jamal Charlo and not fighting Demetrius Andrade. And then they just took the plate and said, "Hey, here, you're the franchise champion," and gave him a fresh, brand new plate to get the food that he wanted, which seems to be a steady diet of Eastern European and European fighters, like the one he's about to fight this weekend. So we got to look deeper into what Canelo Alvarez is saying. And for the record, this is not the first time he said this. In fact, boom, link in the description. DAZN, the company he's been on, it says Canelo dismisses Demetrius Andrade as a future opponent. Quote, "He's a boring fighter." So previously, April 6th, 2020, he said, "I'm not trying to fight Andrade because he's boring." Let me read the direct quote for you guys. Canelo says the truth is Andrade hasn't fought with anyone. He hasn't fought against anyone, and he's also boring, very boring. Maybe he's a good fighter. Maybe he's a good fighter. So right there is like, it's like almost like a Freudian slip, right? You say maybe he's a good fighter. You know he's a good fighter. You know he has skills. You know he went to the Olympics. So just by you, that's an admission. That's a slip up, like a Freudian slip. He says maybe he's a good fighter, but he's also a boring fighter. And at the end of the day, when there's a boring fight, people are going to blame me. I like fights where there's action, where people can enjoy a good show. That's very important to me. But also, he doesn't represent a challenge for me as well because he hasn't fought against anybody. So he's kind of double downing on the multiple reasons why he doesn't need to fight Andrade, right? He's boring, and he can't sell, and he doesn't represent a challenge because he hasn't fought anybody, right? And this is what you frequently see for black fighters in the sport of boxing. They can't sell, or how many tickets you sold, and all these prerequisites that no one else has to go through in order to get the fight. Maybe he's a good fighter, but he's a boring fighter. And at the end of the day, when there's a boring fight, people are going to blame me. Now, ironically enough, I've covered Canelo's career since he's been in America. And this was an article and statements made, captured April 6th of last year. Ironically enough, he fought February of this year, 2021, against Avni Yildirim. And in my honest, humble opinion, that was a boring fight. You fought a guy who had come off a 2-year layoff. Look, with a record of 21, and at the time it was probably 20-2, right? He had come off a fight with Anthony Dirrell, you see right there, which was a loss. And then you fought him 2 years later after Anthony Dirrell got the technical knockout, and then you beat him. So to me, look, so he didn't fight from February 23rd, 2019, all the way until Canelo Alvarez fought him in 2021. So there's multiple holes in what Canelo's saying. You say the fans are going to blame you if the fight is bad. Well, guess what? The average Pilgrim fight was very bad because it was a fight that didn't need to happen. They said it was your mandatory, but so was Charlo. So how come you didn't fight Jamal Charlo, who was a mandatory, and you get this franchise champion position, but you have all the time in the world to fight this guy from Turkey in America, in Miami, that nobody has ever heard of? And he looked horrible. He looked shell-shocked and was just taking punches. So that fight can happen, but not a mandatory Charlo, right? And you say you don't want to take boring fights. This was a boring fight. I would be hard-pressed to believe that Demetrius Andrade or Charlo would just sit there for 2 rounds and let you punch them without countering or attempting to. Speaking of boring, there's multiple holes, as I mentioned, and people that don't deserve. This was a boring fight. Canelo Alvarez's first fight, December 15th, 2018. He fought Rocky Fielding, 28-2. Now that's his current record. At the time, he had already been knocked out in the first round 3 years prior by Caleb Smith. So this was also a boring fight. Canelo Alvarez knocked him out easy work. Fake Aaron Rodgers knocked him out in 3 rounds. And the guy was not, he looked big. There was like a big height disparity, but he didn't show me any type of skill. Guess what? Caleb Smith was also a guy in a boring fight because it was one-way traffic. You had no resistance. They said Caleb Smith he suspended still from Texas because Canelo bashed his arm up, and he suspended indefinitely. That's what this is Box Records saying. And these guys were taller, but they were also from England, out of England, with unproven metal and unproven records on a world level. But once again, a black fighter like Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, who you could have fought at 54, 55, 160, or even 168, you continue to tell Brian Custer, and you've said in your older videos that you're dismissing that, and this is okay with boxing fans because he's boring. Now, I told you there's many holes to this. Demetrius Andrade, the guy that Canelo just told you was super boring, I told you we unpacked. He has a record of 30-0, right? Ironically enough, Billy Joe Saunders has the exact same amount of fights. Andrade is 30-0 with 18 knockouts, and he's 6 feet tall with a 73.5-inch reach. Billy Joe Saunders has the same exact amount of fights with less knockouts, right? 30 with 14 knockouts, whereas Andrade had 18. And he's also has the shorter reach and he's shorter stature, right? He's a southpaw, but surprise, so is Demetrius Andrade. So how is the black fighter with more knockouts, who's taller, with a longer reach, who's been calling you out, right? He's age 33. Billy Joe Saunders is 31. That's only a 2-year difference. They're both southpaws. So Andrade beats him in the height department, in the reach department. Ages are pretty close, within 2 years. And Andrade also has more knockouts with the same exact amount of fights. 30-0 with 14 knockouts for Billy Joe Saunders and 30-0 with 18 knockouts. So the taller, rangier, in my opinion, slicker black fighter, Andrade, is too boring for Canelo. But surprise, surprise, this weekend, who is Canelo fighting? Billy Joe Saunders, the European British fighter, as I've told you. Oh my gosh, my job is getting so easy. Ego Stradamus strikes again. It's fight week. And you can, Andrade doesn't have a belt at 168. But guess what? Canelo said he wanted to be undisputed at 160, where Andrade is a champion. And they're both undefeated. So tell me how Billy Joe Saunders, who failed a drug test and ducked out of a fight with Andrade, with the same record, 30-0, but less knockouts, less height, less reach, and he has a style that's ugly. Billy Joe Saunders, listen, I think Andrade is slicker. Billy Joe Saunders fought Martin Murray. There were no knockdowns. Billy Joe Saunders didn't even look great in this fight, and he looked horrible in this fight with Marcelo Esteban Corceres. This was on the KSI Logan Paul fight. If you watch the She Fat, He Thick, the Sufi fight, he also got rocked in that fight. And before, right around here, he failed a drug test, right? So Demetrius Andrade, a black fighter who hasn't failed a drug test, undefeated, southpaw, just like Billy Joe Saunders, but stronger, apparent by his knockout ratio, rangier, and hasn't failed a drug test, and got a knockdown and badly hurt his opponent, right? In the Liam Williams, who was on a 7 knockout streak. You're saying he hasn't fought nobody. But once again, you fought Avni Yildirim. You fought Caleb Smith. You fought Rocky Fielding. All these other guys have seemingly done quite enough to get the honor. So it's all cap, bro. Listen, I only hold fighters accountable for what they say. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to a situation like this, Canelo has to try with a better reasoning. He's saying that he's too boring, but what is Billy Joe Saunders? Billy Joe Saunders' last fight with Martin Murray, watch that, and then watch Demetrius Andrade versus Liam Williams. Demetrius Andrade, Liam Williams was actually a better fight. So, you know, the walls are closing in. We'll see what Canelo decides to do next. But, you know, it's just more excuses for old media to gobble up and Canelo fans. Oh, this guy's boring. Canelo's team also did this in the past with Willie Monroe. They said, oh, why should we fight Willie Monroe, who was relevant at the time, right? Because we don't like his style, you know, so that becomes the scapegoat. And the sad thing about it is Canelo no longer has Golden Boy to hide behind because he's a free agent. So the decisions that impact your career, they're all on you. You can't blame Oscar, or the fans can't blame Oscar De La Hoya, which they previously did, you know. So Canelo has to put his big boy pants on, and, you know, we'll see what he decides to do after the Saunders fight. In my opinion, Canelo is going to trash Saunders. I don't see any way Saunders wins. People are trying to make it sound like Saunders has a chance. I don't see that. So me personally, I'm not the fighter, but I'm looking past this fight because I think Canelo wins all day. But there are compelling fights like Benavidez, Charlo, Andrade, Beterbiev for him that I prefer to see. And the fans get mad at videos when I speak the truth. I can't help that. Everything I said in this video is true. I showed you. And, you know, it doesn't sound right when you're saying one guy's boring, but you can fight Billy Joe Saunders, who I just showed you, has pretty much looked average or bad in his last 3 fights. He got rocked in this fight. He definitely looked bad in this fight and was losing. Listen, to the point, I know boxing. This is why boxing, you can't get over on me. Billy Joe Saunders admits he doesn't deserve Canelo. Right? He literally said, I don't deserve a top fight. Right? Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. How do you spell this dude's name? See? Caceres. Okay. After the Caceres fight on DAZN, he said, look, Saunders admitted his performance was flat in his post-fight interview. Quote, no excuses. That performance was not worthy of Canelo or Danny Jacobs. And then they said he was sick, conveniently had an excuse. So he's 1 fight removed from this performance where he self-admittedly that he doesn't deserve a Canelo fight, right? As I've showed you. 1 fight, and then that was in 2019, and he fought a Martin Murray, who I thought was retired, and got beat up by Triple G. Those fights are okay. And then after failing a drug, so he failed a drug test, had flat performances. In this performance, told you he didn't even deserve Canelo. Then because he beats a domestic level Martin Murray at 168, a guy who got beat up at 160 by Triple G, he deserves Canelo. I mean, come on. Y'all got to stop. All facts, no cap. It's a Snapple fact. So we see what Canelo is doing. It's just a matter of people are going to continue to accept it, and support and buy into the fights. The other thing is, ironic enough, Billy Joe Saunders has done a lot of complaining for this particular fight, saying the ring is too small. He's being set up. They're removing judges. They promised me a bigger ring. They're favoring him and planning beyond me. If you fought guys like Charlo, Benavidez, and Andrade, we don't know. They don't have a history of inconsistent performances, so you probably would have less drama to even worry about in the pre-build, as opposed to all the crying that Billy Joe Saunders and Tyson Fury have been doing. Let me know how I did in this video. Checkmate. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support.